Started moving Ney and Sewell, I guess, onto the board further. Ney just came on this turn, getting their fatigue counters. Looking over here, I could just rest this core, trade firepower, start decreasing my fatigue levels, which might not be a bad thing. I'm not in a terrible position right now. However, I may want to speed things up. In order to speed things up, I have, what is this guy up to? It looks like he's kind of delayed his movement. I have these cav here. Now, these guys are lights, all lights. These guys are lights. That causes a problem. Because I'm playing with opportunity charge, if I move a hex here, I can be countercharged. I'm not allowed to charge. Normally, you're allowed to charge at a greater range than you're allowed to countercharge at. That would be the case if these weren't lights. But as it stands, if I moved forward, I would be opening myself up to a countercharge situation. Now, that might not be a terrible thing, because by doing so, I would open up as well the capability of the infantry to move forward. But it gives the advantage to the countercharger. In the cav versus cav battle, they would get the edge. They don't get that edge if I don't give them the opportunity to countercharge. I don't know. You know, when we look at charge combat resolution, it's not going to suffer the extra infantry losses. Not really sure it affects much. Yeah, it does. It heavily increases the melee value of the unit. So I'm in a position where I can't actually close. That's a little fucked up, to tell you the truth. Everything's frozen. Now, the reason for this is those dense fog rolls, which I don't believe prevent... I don't believe they prevent the optional rule from being in play. But that's the thing. It's a combination of a special rule for this scenario with an optional rule that maybe they didn't even really consider, causing this kind of weird situation where I cannot close, I cannot get first shot on the charge. So normally what would happen if this wasn't under the fog is I could move forward. I could declare a charge here against that cav. Now that cav would have the opportunity to do withdrawals, although maybe not against the other lights, or the more reasonable opportunity to roll for a countercharge, and we could smack into each other, and boom, we have a big cav fight, and the outcome of that would determine kind of what kind of advances I'm able to make. I could also do some advances and do some firing into the cav. That also happens before the melee actually occurs. So there's all kinds of interesting stuff that would happen normally in this situation. Instead, we've got a terror situation. Like, they both know the enemy's out there, and neither one can afford to move. This guy cannot move. He has he's in this special out of command, can't move a unit rolls. And these guys are in the, they may not be allowed to move, but they're allowed to charge. They're allowed to countercharge. That's not considered movement, and I just can't justify giving them that edge in strength on the melee table. Now I can peek at what we're facing. On a countercharge, we'd be facing probably 10 to 9. You know, it would be a 1-to-1 attack. That might not be so bad, especially if I throw in some firepower. Now, melee strength. unlike fire strength, may well get modified. Ruh-roh. See 8.4. Multiply each unit by the unit's current number of steps. Yeah, so steps is the black number, I think. Yeah. So here we're actually, what are we looking at? We're looking at melee strength. We're looking at a 12 melee. And here we're looking at an 18. Right. Yeah, but this isn't a 12. This is a 20 to 18. It would still be 1 to 1. It wouldn't be that terrible. And see, if I do move forward a hex, then I can charge if he fails at his countercharge or whatever. And you know, I'm spending the kind of time on this that I spent on the 2 minutes to midnight or whatever per card play. But you know, it's a situation that even if I was familiar with the system, I can already see this is an odd situation which does not apply, and it creates a different kind of issue simply because of the special rules for this scenario in combination with that option. Another thing is I could just move infantry forward and eat it, you know. Expect that I'm going to be able to drop into square formation. Or I could shift into square and move forward. Maybe not all in one turn. I don't know if I have enough movement points to do that. Because it costs me a movement point or two to change formation. But a square only has one movement point, so I think I couldn't do both. I could march forward and drop into square. I couldn't drop into square and march forward. Let me keep considering this weird shit and whether I want to bend the rules, you know, as written to try to comply more with what I believe reality should be. But yeah, I mean, one of the factors is I'll be able to engage in fire combat and reduce that. This is a hard part of the game. These suckers indicate a given turn. Well, turn 2 means I believe I'm allowed to start checking for morale recovery this turn, for whatever that matters. And I don't know what that is. Of course, I find other stuff that creates more problems. I was looking around for something, and I see this modulated demoralization. This is in the optional rules. For a core-based demoralization, to avoid the players knowing exactly when it will occur, the following process is used. When demoralization level -5 is used. What? What are we talking about here? I could not find a core-based demoralization before, but this appears to be some kind of modifier to core-based. Gives a new threshold to morale. Now, if I run back here, I haven't seen any core-based demoralization yet. I've got this army morale. For the army or core total, yeah, which one? Both, all, what? Reaches half its total losses. Then we get an issue. So this has if you reach half your total losses -1, or -5, you make a die roll to see what the actual losses are. So you can't calculate it quite as specifically, and you might be on the edge of demoralization right away. So that's what that is. It talks about it under army morale. Somehow they slip these parenthesized or core here. But up here, in some scenarios, demoralization applies to Army Corps separately instead of applying to the Army as a whole, which, again, I think would be in the scenario special rules, and it isn't there. So what does that mean? I don't know. I really don't fucking know. And Corps-based demoralization makes perfect sense to me. If a Corps is battered enough, I could see it being demoralized. But yeah. So 2 full turns before the first rally. Only if the number is too lower than the current turn number. So yeah, so these guys can't actually try to rally. I would have wanted to throw Lon in there if they could. Although I used to call him Linné. That's what it looks like. But I'm convinced that's not how you're supposed to pronounce it. So I'm still stuck with, yeah, I don't know what to do. One thing that, I know what I was looking up. Let's just do it since you can catch kind of what causes these problems. I was looking up the fatigue rules, which are in the optional rules somewhere. This is why I don't do it, because it's not a lot of fun to flip through. Okay, we haven't, there it is. Okay. More than half their unit's movement allowance gets that. And how do you recover? Corps which, okay, so if I want to recover a morale, I can't move anything. However, I could shift forces over and move just a couple of units, and that might be worth more to me. Or I could dare the cav, but I don't fucking know. I made a choice here to not move anything. I shifted some of my skirmishers around instead, which works fine. That'll get me some firepower there. I'm allowed to dump another skirmy here, actually, at the front of that. Okay. That'll get countered, but I get to shoot on my turns at least. Over here, things are a little more interesting. Because the Prussians moved up here, I really have no choice but to declare a charge. Now, I think there's a morale check when you declare a charge. Again, I don't know these things. I'm gonna have to look. I know the countercharge requires one, but I think maybe a charge does too. Absolutely certain that this that a countercharge can't generate a countercharge, and here's why. Because of this one slice, to defend a cav unit. Now this is under charges, not countercharges. May opt to stay in column or general order, or it may attempt a countercharge during the opponent's movement or charge phase. This is neither of those. I'm still reading the rules as being specific, not allowing me to walk into here without charging that cav. It's not how things are supposed to work. And the reason is you're supposed to be able to launch a charge. You're supposed to be in a position where if you see enemy cav, you have to kind of screen it off by charging it. And I'm not allowed to because of the range. However, I'm also not able to move. But yeah, this idea of I could defend by doing this, there's basically no way I can move forward. I can't charge, I can't avoid a countercharge that's undefended. And I'm just very troubled by all of that. And this thing can't either, because it's too far away and it's not allowed to move at all. But charge does not require a does not require a check. So I move into here. That causes a countercharge check if I want it. I could also withdraw. These guys have a morale of 8. Do they each check separately? I don't know. I think they each check separately. All the units passed their morale check. That sounds like it. Okay, one failed. Nothing bad happens. The other one succeeded. So I have a countercharge here. Now, this is a weird situation because this guy's not involved. The other cav has streamed forward and hit. At least that's the way I read it. Because honestly, I should be using this. What we're seeing is not that. This. What we're seeing is a countercharge by that unit into this hex. That unit's not doing it. That's fucking skirmisher. What the hell? Like that. Now I get to move my infantry formation. Some firepower went. The grenadiers that were placed here have vaporized. That's going to cause some additional interesting opportunities for the French. I wasn't paying too much attention to what I had up there. I put, I don't know, I guess I don't know, these units do not have a lot of steps. This one does, this one does not. Anyway, the Prussians are falling apart, which they should, but so no biggie there. I'm not going to make any melee attacks because if I do any, it undoes the benefit that I already marked and gives me an additional fatigue, and I don't really want to do that. The Imperial Guard still standing up there. They got nothing they can do. So we do have a charge down here, though. And I should be paying some kind of attention to fatigue for Davout. He has moved to infantry every turn, I think. Haven't been paying attention because he doesn't have orders, but he should still be paying attention to fatigue, and no one else is involved in any. These I'm treating as if they're a cav corps. I don't know what the hell they actually are. And so we have this charge. So this is a charge by the Prussians at them. And what I said was 3 steps at, what are our numbers? The little red. 18 to 2 steps at 5. 18 to 10. 18 to 10. Are there other modifiers here? Oh. Unfortunately, that's not clear without opening the rolls. Fender formation and terrain. Terrain looks clear to me. There is a slope there, but we're not actually in it. So that's what we're facing. And clear is not going to affect anything good. Okay, we got no bonuses. Yeah, I think we're just at, what was I saying? 18 to 10. What do we got here? That sounds like 3 to 2. What do we roll? Do we roll just 1 die? That's my assumption, but, you know. A die modified by a leader. First result is attacker, second is defender, yeah. So we get a 5, which is good for the Prussians. They get a 0D. D means I have disorganized, and this is turn 1, 2. Oh, those are Prussians coming on. They haven't hit yet. So this is turn 3. and this unit retreats 2 hexes. And is disordered. That's a real disorganized. It's not a fake blown cav disorganized. What happens to my cav after the charge? I don't know if it advances. So this was a counter charge. It immediately engages the enemy in melee without moving. The countercharging cav is the attacker. If the infantry, a stack of cavalry can also countercharge as one. Does not trigger any fire. All units currently stacked with the moving unit are countercharged. After the countercharging unit does not move. Stops the active unit's movement. Reverts to column or general order. But an infantry can engage in melee during the next melee phase. But not cav. So I would stop them. So this is what we saw happen. No damage, but we drove them back. All right. That was the melee phase, and that is the end. We'd hit rally. There's no one able to be rallied. So again, the hard part for me is I've got these numbers on here. Let's ignore the fatigue ones. I may throw some other number counters out for that or track it differently. But I've got these numbers for the fatigue, for the turn that things change. But the turns are not trivial to count. So 1 is easy, 2, yeah, I'm at 3. But at some point or another, they're going to get really kind of painful. And eventually they roll around, right? Eventually they roll around. They go way up there for no great reason. The assumption is, I guess, that more units I'll be in a disordered state in sort of that early to mid-game period. But I mean, so most games have a lot of low number things because they indicate hits or something like that against units. And as you go further and further up, it's like, well, there are very few units who can have that many hits or who have that strength, depending on which way the order goes. Here, though, the order should be pretty even, and actually it's kind of weird because at the beginning of the game there's almost no units on the map, but later on there are a whole bunch. And how many turns are there to this thing? Well, that's a good question. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24 turns. This doesn't go up to 24. It's just this, the assumptions of what works where and why don't work with this system, but on the other hand, you could rotate them, fairly regularly. If the numbers are getting out of hand, if you're getting up to that, above 10 turns portion, you could just reset everything, maybe subtract 10 off everything. You're not going to see disorganized markers from way back. Yeah, there's some chance, but it's pretty much impossible for disorganized markers to remain from way back. On the other hand, it's kind of nice to get out of their way because then you won't be getting confused by similar markers for fatigue if you're using. Anyway, again, way too many words. I should just be playing the game, right? But I want to show the difficulty in accessing this game again. This system. It is not easy. And I have to just say, I mean, and I've said it before, I feel like the problem has more to do with coping with the complexities of a Napoleonic system as opposed to from other periods. Now, Battles of the Age of Reason, is not far from this either. So you're already getting that sort of interrelation between the different arms. It's just the artillery hasn't gotten as strong as it is post the French reforms. One of the problems with the units is they're not trivial to see what's going on. And one of them cav that I brought along with me is actually a horse artillery. And I think I counted it as 3 strength points at 2 steps or something. I have no idea. I'm gonna put this somewhere back here again, because I'm bringing in more reinforcements. We'll let the situation stand because, hey, you know, the hell with it. But yeah, that I don't know. I mean, it was possible it could have anyway. We were looking at, although I probably wouldn't have attacked, we were looking at 3 steps at 6. That's 18. That sounds like what I actually counted. I don't know what the hell these guys are up to. And what was this? This was 2 steps at 5, 18 to 10. That sounds like what I had. Oh, remember, one of them didn't charge. Okay, cool. No wonder I didn't notice them. But things look similar enough. In not column, if you look at infantry in column, they've got this kind of, what the hell is this? That's got to be artillery, yeah? No. No, these are the artillery. Yeah, I don't know. It's difficult to detect what something is. And it's one of the reasons that I kind of like NATO symbols, I guess, is that they're clear. But what I found is other games have an easier way of showing you what you're looking at. This comes closest to Labatt, which, you know, it's like, oh, look, it's the outside of their uniform that you're supposed to tell what the hell they are by. And I think Battles of the Age of Reason does the same thing. And it's like the most useless piece of information you can have. If we get to the Napoleonic Brigade series, you'll see the horses and the artillery are nicely distinguished. They have cannons or horses on them, I believe, which is different from the infantry, which goes with flags or whatever, similar to most of the others. You start making things difficult to distinguish from each other, and you start throwing in problems where stuff is going on that just, Jesus, I don't know what the fuck to do with it. And I really don't know what to do with this artillery. I could probably put it to here because there's no chance that the French could get that far very quickly. Some of the setup crap. If we take a look at this one. Yeah, the advance rules for this. The Prussian forces are permanently out of command for the duration of this scenario, must abide by all restrictions of such units. That should theoretically override any other command and control rules for the length of that scenario. In the historical scenario, it has something similar where these units can't move until something comes closer to them, but they're out of command control. I mean, under the same situation as the other things and whatever. Well, somewhere in the rules, it says all units are in command control for the first turn of the scenario. And someone asked this question of the designer, does that apply? Which I wouldn't even think of asking. And I think it was with regards to this particular, the opening moves in the fog scenario. I wouldn't even think about asking that because very clearly scenario rules, it's actually said in the rules, the scenario rules overrule. But the designer said, yes, they are just answered it with a yes. But I mean, my assumption is that he could read the English well enough and understand the implications and whatnot. English is a second language to him, and there were places in certain questions where I feel like, he was trying to probe to make a better understanding of things. But here it seemed like a pretty simple thing, and it was like, does the basic rule still apply that all units are still in command? And he just answered yes. And I'm like, well, that's astounding to me. I would say that it's quite possible that there isn't even a firm grasp. So here's one of the things. You usually look at the designer of a game or something as, the ultimate authority, whatever. But it's quite possible that someone may not be such an ultimate authority anymore after some time. They may let some ideas pass beyond as they're working on other projects and whatnot. So that's always one indication. But when you're talking about something that, from start to finish is so kind of sloppily put together, I question whether he ever really was. Anyhow, because it kind of doesn't make sense. It's like, oh yeah, right at the time when they are most vulnerable and least know what the hell's going on, that's the time when they're freely able to move in full command control with, I guess, all units. I guess these things can too, even though they're specifically denied when you go over to the historical scenario. They don't exist in the through the fog scenario. But if you go to the historical scenario, which starts at the same time and does not actually deal with these units at all, in any sense of the word. Yeah, I'm just befuddled by that answer, especially because it just seems so completely at odds with any possible interpretation that you could make. I don't know. Again, I can't imagine that the question would have been asked even. Yet the answer, going in the exact opposite direction of what all reason would lead to, just leaves me stunned. Here on the Jena map, basically nothing happening. Got rid of some of them skirmishers, just clearing them out of the way because I can get rid of two. I have two skirmishers coming out of this unit, and it's a light unit. So I cleared out the remainder. Pretty soon there will be three in place of those two, and that'll give me less options. No casualties though. Over here, the artillery is placing itself here. I'm going to try to get it into a position where I can start bombarding those squares if they're going to stick around. Meanwhile, I'm going to use, what's turning out to be a fairly heavy cav contingent. I put myself into position. I'm going to have to charge if nothing changes, and the French may have some issues in dealing with this situation. Okay, that brings us to 7 a.m. 7:30. Hard to track. And 1, 2, 3, turn 4, which means turn 2 guys can make their rolls. This guy's turn 3. Similar suspicion allowed me to discover some more artillery. Putting these guys up here, going to start bombarding that cav. Why the hell not? Well, I can't yet. Artillery range is still 2 because of the fog. We'll move it to here then, because that unit's within 2. And this one as well, heading up the hill, gonna unleash some artillery and just, start picking at things. Is this artillery too? Wow, it kind of looks like it. Yeah. And here I am thinking that I've got like something that, you know, looks like cav moving along. 2, 3, 4. That's fine. Oh well. But yeah, we're gonna. And over here I had another artillery which ran back here. It was actually sitting here. I thought it was gonna form a whole square running down here. Nah, it's some artillery. So I sent it around, and then forming a square here. The Prussians are in a little bit of trouble. They're going to have to launch a charge next turn. I have no choice because of the Blucher rule, and I'm going to be charging a square, and good luck with that. You can put artillery inside a square. If it's limbered, it's protected by the square. If it's unlimbered, if it's on top, it has half firepower, but takes the losses from the melee. And that just seemed like a really, really bad idea. I think the square's got a better chance without the artillery in it. Now, I could protect it still, but yeah, that didn't seem terribly valuable. And things are feeling really, really clunky in terms of like manipulating the system, in part because I can't tell the artillery from the cav. They look too much like each other. And I'm moving around. I don't remember this problem occurring too much before. Of course, my eyes have gotten worse since then. So I guess it's time to shoot some guns. So, fired back and forth. Got a couple of hits on this unit. Village is gonna fall. That's a grenadier. It's actually a pretty big unit, a lot of steps, but you know, they're gonna just melt away as things go. My plans with Sul are to swing up and cut this way. I don't know how necessary that is against an enemy who can't even move. These other forces, Ney was going to position himself here. I don't think he actually goes for Radigan, and this force is going to go high diddle up the middle and just cut between those units. And what do we got? Right. So the reason I came back on video was I've got a rally check here, and in order to do this, we look at his morale, which is 9. He's got a -2 for being disorganized, but he's got a leader bonus. And what number is that? Let's find a leader. Morale bonus is in the middle there. So that's a 4. So he's actually like an 11. We get a good enough number. So that rallies and is now no longer a disorganized unit, for whatever that matters. Now that it's not disorganized, on the next turn, maybe I could try to recover stragglers. It's kind of painful because to remember that you have to recover stragglers, you have to look to see what's injured, what's not. It's not like, so in the CWB NBS series, when you recover stragglers, it's generally forces that are without orders that are doing this, or that are on defend orders that like nobody's attacking. So here, the difference is, I think it's done unit by unit, which is kind of obnoxious. If I can find where it is, I seem to recall that it was an optional role, troops reintegration. Out of fire range of an enemy unit with a leader on it that did not move during movement and already took losses. So, I mean, a corps is not really able to recover many units, and you're going to have to do it unit by unit in this game. Of course, you can recover any strength points. I probably want to get Nappy off of here too. Lefebvre can stay where he is. 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll just put him down here. That gets him in range that I can move him, to Lan when I feel like I need to write new orders. or extend orders, which, basically what I could do is take his orders, whatever the hell they are, drive through these to Krippendorf. Okay, it's going to be quite some time. But I can still also use him for his massive rally capability and also in order to recover troops. So, if things continue, that seems like a good idea. That's going to put me to the gray dice over here, and I don't know what turn I'm on. I should be over here at 7:30. That means a bunch more Prussians coming on, doesn't it? Yeah, 7:30. I don't know if I want to cope with that, so I guess we'll stop halfway between the turns. I'm in between sleeps right now, so, but far more awake than I want it to be. Push into the Prussian side of the 7:30 turn. I had these pieces set up here. These are really all part of the stuff that shows up in the historical scenario as part of the setup at 8 a.m. And isn't covered in the opening move scenario at all as a reinforcement. Now this goes until the end of the 8:30 turn, so an hour later. It's just a weird situation. I kind of wish I had started, I had not gone with through the fog, because I'm not getting the historical result here. Blucher's going to make one charge, and that's it. What these guys really should be doing is screening the formation of these units, because what's going to happen is this Togwitz coming south from here, all these infantry show up there. Well, if they're waking up and preparing in the morning or something, there should be some kind of rule for that in, whatever the historical scenario is or whatever. Something that forces the Prussian cav to try to prevent the French from moving up to here. Now, the victory conditions, if the Prussians can succeed in them, prevent that. But those victory conditions are impossible to meet. And so what instead we've gotten is something that's going to allow the Prussians to form and didn't take a toll on the Prussian cav, because my victory conditions for the French were just to avoid being knocked about too much. So forming into squares made perfect sense. It doesn't make sense in the light of the whole battle. It does make them essentially invulnerable for this opening moves through the fog scenario. If you so chose to, play that as maybe an intro or something, you'd just be sitting there saying, well, how can the Prussians possibly win? How can they meet their victory conditions if the French do this, And in fact, I'd have another unit in square, and I'd have the artillery out front, because why not? In a limited scenario, there's no real reason to view anything other than the victory conditions. Well, the victory conditions are just that the French are not, out in the open. Now, it would be a lot better if instead of outside of any village, and I could have just, marched up here way away from the Prussian cav or whatever, I could have done a number of interesting things and pop out of the village into the woods where the cav can't really hurt me. What would have made a lot more sense is to say there were no French beyond a certain line, say this hex row or something. And then you would have some sort of disruption effect possible in the main scenario. None of that was done. And so this map really, there's a reason that you don't do the combined that I did. However, if you're playing one of these optional scenarios here, I don't know about these suckers. I think these suckers start with the main scenario. But if you're playing one of these combined scenarios, none of which are the historic scenario, you are starting at 6 a.m. However, the Prussians are better set up in every single one of these. You have a better Prussian command, this Brunswick's intuition, I don't know what the fuck that is. Clausewitz's argument for what could have been done, and then the, hey, let's throw everything at the French here and make it as bad as possible. But every single one of them is a completely different from the historical, and takes away, a lot of the situations that make Jena and Auerstaedt such a great combined French victory. Well, and some of them involve, troops that were not in the area and could not have reacted at all. It involves significant operational differences from what historically happened, which, might have ended up, if you're not careful, with battles at different locations or something. When you're dealing with the historical, unless you don't stray much, maybe the Brunswick's intuition would be acceptable or whatever. But if you're tinkering too much, you're beginning to throw the whole situation into question. All right. Well, I think the first thing I must do is I must launch a charge here. I'll try to do it against this thing. I'm not thrilled about this. It goes there. The charge marker goes here. Oh, the one thing the Prussians did succeed in doing is busting up that French cav. Which, okay. And then beyond that, we move to, I guess, our normal movement. The Prussians are still handcuffed over here. I don't know when I start getting somebody in for here. This is Auerstaedt. Yeah, in this attempt not to repeat things, they make trying to play the campaign very difficult. I would much rather. I don't know. So this is opening moves through the fog. This is, which may have something of importance, but this is the scenario that I'm officially playing. So 8 o'clock is when Hohenlohe shows up. I hope I have. Yeah, it looks like he's hiding in there. And then he can start writing orders or stuff, but yeah, I don't know. So yeah, there's no movement here. Here we've got, I set up some artillery to start bombarding to weaken the square that I'm hitting. But the first thing that happens is the square gets to fire at the cav that's attacking it. So square has a fire value of just 1, which is pretty shitty. And it does not get a hit in it. And then I'll conduct what fire the French have, and also come back with the Prussian fire, and then we'll take care of that melee on video. A disappointing turn for the Prussians. They got cleared out of the village. No other hits were taken, but you can see what happens when you can't react to the enemy and run away when you're outnumbered or whatever. Here, I think I've been forgetting about the thick fog's effect on artillery. Not positive. Not positive at all. But, oh, is this? Yeah, I gotta look around and make sure I don't have artillery hiding. It's one of the problems. But, yeah, I forgot to pick off those couple of units. It did it after I did the die rolls, but would have reacted the same either way. But yeah, I didn't get many shots off with that French artillery, and I don't know, but it probably caused an extra loss, whatever. So anyway, we have the charge here. So because melee combat is kind of weird in this game, right? And so is fire combat. And this is why this game system is a little hard to adapt to outside of the cav charge rules and whatnot. But the way the melee strength is determined is particularly odd. This okay, we've got no terrain in place, so it's going to be the number of steps times the strength, right? Yeah, okay. So the strength here is 6, the steps were 3, but we can't be sure of that. It's possible I took a hit. No, it's not. I have not marked any losses over on that clipboard, and that's the one that covers this battle. So I should have that clipboard up here for now. Okay. So yeah, so this is 6 times 3 is 18. And this is 2 times 7 is 14. Now, we have the square situation going on. So 18 to 14, I guess since I have a calculator kicking around, it'll be easier. 1.2, so that's going to just be a straight 1-to-1. My brain's not working well enough. I'm having trouble doing the, hey, how do I get to the 3-to-2? And that would be 18 to 12, I say, fogging my brain greatly. I don't know why my brain's not working. I even have coffee today. What the hell? Trying to think if there's anything else that affects the square. Just trying. So what they don't, what's here is +1 step loss against infantry. The cav would cause an automatic extra step loss against the infantry. Cav also has a decent strength. It just doesn't seem like there's enough of an effect of the square. So I think that's it. We get a 5 at 1-to-1. We are both going to take a step loss, and I guess the French take a morale check. And unlike fire, I guess melee doesn't require a morale check. Yeah, I guess fire doesn't normally require a morale check. And towns would be immune to that morale check, although under the option I'm playing, they would have a -2. So, other than marking off, let's take a look at the morale check. I know that there's no losses here. He's got a morale of 9. He's in square. Does that have any effect here? Let's take a look. Wouldn't be there. Would be here. Yeah, I don't see anything. Oh, morale +2 versus cav. That's what I'm looking at. So yeah, I have an 11 morale. Woo, close. Okay, so otherwise I'm just marking off those 2 hits. And the cav charged. I'll come back with what happens from that after I mark these. I can't keep that on the stack too long. Something. Optional rule, heavy cav, have a +1 on their die roll. So this was actually a 6. So those losses get withdrawn, and this unit is disorganized with a 2-hex retreat. Oops. So that changes the situation somewhat. That allows me a charge exploitation. The disorganized unit goes. I could move into another space and then initiate another melee. I don't know if Blucher is forced to do this. We're looking at the same kind of odds in each case. I feel like no. And then what happens after a charge? That's a good question. Yeah, so if I don't want to move into that hex and try to exploit, which I don't particularly want to do, I can either do this or I can blow the cav. If I blow the cav, he gets a rally chance on this next turn. That might be safer, because otherwise those squares are going to be able to move forward. Now, here's a real problem for the French, well, for everyone really, is these guys can march up in square formation, but then they generate opportunity fire from the artillery. Well, yeah, I believe they do. I'll have to look at that. Opportunity range for artillery is 2 hexes, but I don't know if you're moving closer if that's going to generate it. But then they would definitely generate defensive fire from the artillery, but they'd also generate a possible countercharge. So if I move up in square, I'm defending myself against that countercharge to some extent. However, I'm at more threat from the artillery. And if I move up in line, I won't have the movement points to jump the square. I will be able to try during a countercharge. Doesn't really make much difference. Probably better off just moving in square to begin with, because I know I'll be countercharged if I move in line. With this, I've got a more... Actually, these guys are not lights. They cannot countercharge at that range. I'm always thinking that 2-hex range for the countercharge. Why am I thinking that? Is there some other game where that is really the case? Because it feels like Cav doesn't have a lot of projection in this game the way it does in some others. I wonder, and again, it may just be that I'm used to using lights to defend the flanks better. Anyway, that's some of my mumbo jumbo about all of this. I think we are done with the turn, and that's going to put us to a French, I guess, 8 a.m. turn, with nothing coming in on this map. But over here, we have at least bits of the 6th Corps coming in. These aren't full French Corps that are on the board in these 3 locations. They've got reinforcements coming to them. All right, and again, you know, I don't feel like I did a lot with the pieces, but I'm fatigued from having to look stuff up. So for example, that cav rule with the heavy cav getting a +1, that's a matter of not serendipity, but me looking up charges and remembering to go look in the optional rules, because, oh wait, there are additional cav rules in the optional rules. They may impact this. It's one of the real problems with the way the rules are structured. The good side of how the rules are structured is that you really have this incredibly configurable game. The bad side of it is that makes for a horrible, horrible game to try to learn and remember, right? It's not just learning, it's remembering. Now, I almost always want to play with the most complex rule set that I can. Well, not necessarily the most complex, but the one that I judge is the most accurate, that's going to give me the best story. And I might throw some things out as I test them and say, well, I don't really like how that works. With this system, I kind of do like how most of these rules work. I might want to make some modifications, like not using the same number counters for fatigue as I use for everything else. And those number counters are supposed to be the skirmishers too. It's just the game happens to include skirmishers in a very small quantity for some reason. But that's okay. I have things like this that I can use to fill in the gaps, at least for now. There's a lot more pieces that come on the board later. But yeah, I mean, that configuration capability is, to me, it's almost the same flaw that exists in the programmed instruction. If you look at how Magic Realm rules were written, it's this, well, here's the simple game, and it's not, I mean, Magic Realm is just so much worse, because it's like, here's a game where you're just allowed to move around on the board and not fight or do anything or search or anything. It would be like teaching you the basics of movement as a full scenario that you're supposed to play. And then the next scenario maybe teaches you how you change formations and stuff like that. It is really that bad, the Magic Realm thing, which is why the fan-based rules went to, let's do it all in one rule set. The problem there is they took a 26-page rule book, right, that included compendiums and whatnot, and bloated it into, like 120 pages, just trying to nail everything down. I'm not asking for that. I kind of like the loose style that these rules are written in. It's got its issues, but I do kind of like that. Maybe a little too loose here. Magic Realm didn't feel that way. But just to throw something that has nothing to do with Napoleonics out there. But it is the game that I'm most used to having the PI with. Another one is Starship Troopers. That would be a little closer to this, I guess. Where they're like, here's some rules. Now we're going to take the rules away and add different ones. Well, that's how this is designed in a lot of ways. Especially the command rules with all the configuration surrounding them. And it's just kind of like, why would you play with no command rules at all? I would say, the first two levels of command rules shouldn't be in their own section. They should be the base rules or something. But anyway, to me, it's like, I don't know. That configuration capability makes the game much, much more difficult to approach and deal with. And you know what? If I want to modify a game to my own taste, I got no fear in doing so. I don't really need the designer's permission. And in fact, this is what I was hoping to do with Labatt, because there's so many battles covered in Labatt that I'm like, I could get a lot of Napoleonic fun in if all I did was added a rules system, an orders writing system to the Labatt system. The problem with Labatt is it's so fucking concerned with formation changes and little bits of movement technicalities. And same thing with the BAR, Battles of the Age of Reason. It's really this attempt to translate, the miniatures experience fully onto a map. And I consider that that choice was kind of obviated in 1975-76 with Terrible Swift Sword and with Wellington's Victory. Both of those games just said, hey, here's what the advantage is of using a hex grid, okay? And these other games that are much more miniatures based still trying to use the hex grid are problematic in my view. This game doesn't have that problem, luckily. Anyway. I mean, if I want to play minis, I'll play minis, right? I don't need Labatt. I would have, you know, yeah. You don't even need miniatures to play minis. All you need is the map and, you know, some cardboard that you can use as bases and whatnot. So it's not a matter of like, oh, well, you know, I'm avoiding spending all this money on the minis. You're really not. The advantage of a mini system is you can play just about any battle using that system. The disadvantage is, as far as I'm concerned, the amount of painful, fiddly, movement-related factors that come into it. There's also, you know, checking range for fire and shit like that. That stuff just doesn't, I don't know, doesn't please me too much. A bit of a conundrum over here on the Auerstaedt map. Opportunity fire would allow me to shoot at the units at distance. I can't throw skirmishers out of a square. That wouldn't make sense, I think. It seems wrong. I'm not convinced that it necessarily is, but it seems to defeat the purpose of a square. But I gotta find the optional rules, the Voltigeurs, and oh boy. Align infantry. Yeah, I don't see. Disorganized unit in square and militia can't do it. Yeah. Okay, good. I could see the argument for it because the skirmishers could jump back into the square, but honestly, I think they would just get run down. So if I move forward, I can force an additional charge, which is not unappealing. If I convert to line, I can throw some skirmishers out and cause some issues. A little bit of extra firepower. But then I have to make a morale check to turn to square. Also, if I move, it generates possible counter charges, which maybe I want, maybe I don't. I think I'm best off just sitting here. I get to try to rally this unit. I have my leader there to help me. Over here, I'm going to recover this unit. Try to get that strength point back. And I've just spread skirmishers out as I wait for this force to come up and disentangle my situation. Those are its orders. The Prussians would be out of there already, but I kind of don't want to charge them. I've got some artillery in play now. This one's not unlimbered yet, but my own skirmishers also reduce my artillery fire. So, you know, and artillery fires have, so I'm basically going to be shooting on the one column there, but I can throw a skirmisher in with that. I could have moved a unit into here. That might not have been a bad choice. That wouldn't cause me fatigue as long as I'm not using up. So fatigue is using up more than half your movement points. So I actually wouldn't have to address fatigue, but here's the thing. I'm getting free shots on these guys. That's something that it's hard to compare to. Whereas if I march forward, they all get a shot on me before I get a shot back at them. And I just view the skirmishers as being a superior factor, you know. The Prussians are never getting to fire their skirmishers because they're just clearing mine. Every other turn I get to fire my full skirmisher complement. A couple of them get knocked out, you know, by skirmisher versus skirmisher combat, or whatever you want to call that. We got a bunch of forces coming in. This is more of 6th Corps up here. We got, what is this? 7th Corps Augulaire or whatever, kind of embedded in these. And things are going to get worse because you can see I'm running behind the schedule. I do the, and maybe this isn't even covered in these rules. I don't think it is, to tell you the truth. But I do the, if you're marching in on a road, you got to be in stacking compliance all the way down that road. Now, some of these things, these artillery and such not, I probably could combine with other units, so this tail is not as long as it should be, but that's me just adding something that I believe belongs in this rule system, and I don't think there's any rule for it, so I just add that, and I feel like that's fine. But yeah, it does mean that the arrival times are going to be slowed down where everything's coming in on one space. Here, like I said, I think I'm just going to stand steady. That maybe isn't the wisest thing. Jesus. You know, I mean, the historical situation is all of Blucher's cav is disordered and, you know, has gotten kind of beaten up by the situation. And instead, by trying to follow the victory conditions for that pre-battle scenario, I've set things up so that, like, yeah, well, they're fine, actually. And Davout's not pressing, which that scenario is just has the wrong victory conditions at the very least. Yeah, I really don't want to trigger countercharges because I have no capacity to defend against them with my cav here. And I can't move close to his cav with my cav, or else I'll get countercharged without being able to come out of column. It just doesn't work. So we'll trade some shots, I guess. The Prussians got was this long-range artillery fire, no effect. And the French, I think, caused one hit over here. Maybe I should be charging a little harder. I don't know. Got the troop recovery, got the the disorder recovery, and gotta pay attention to how many units are being destroyed out of each command. I'm still obviously not at that half or whatever that would cause an issue, but it's kind of hard to tell. I think this is all Hohenloh's command, and he's got more units coming on, so there's not a whole hell of a lot. Like, it's going to be really hard to get to that level. We see nothing demoralized, so we're looking at 3 units out of at least what's on the board in terms of causing core demoralization. Although, I don't know if core demoralization exists or not. Again, like, the way that rule is worded, it sounds like core demoralization has to be called for in the specific rules, which disturbs me. Because there should be something that kind of fucks with a core's ability to keep going. Now, in the NBS order system, and CWB for that matter, and line of battle and all the regimental subseries and whatever, the way that's handled is the units themselves just have their own morale, but the corps commander has difficulty continuing their attacks when their corps starts getting chewed up. There's nothing like that in this. Instead, the units have an additional penalty on them. I prefer the Gamers, the NBS series rules on this, because I think it reflects things better. It's the will of the whole force to continue with aggressive or defensive orders, for that matter, if you're playing with the possibility of defensive orders failing. which really has an impact. Now, the only thing that gets you to this is, if you're to the equivalent of that, or to something similar, is when the army morale hits desperate threshold, because that can cause chain reaction disorders or routes or something, right? Yeah. And it also requires a morale check across the board. Now, this also has a morale check across the board for the demoralization level. Now, where does it talk about core? Applies to Army Corps separately instead of applying to the Army as a whole. Yeah, geez. You know, it would make more sense with the Corps separately, for the simple fact that we've got different forces on different boards. So the idea of the Army as a whole making a check means communications between these two maps that are probably impossible to maintain. You know, it would take a couple hours to find out that a battle was largely lost on one map or the other. On the other hand, if I did Army demoralization levels on each map, that's probably what is intended. I haven't looked at, there's no general rule, because I have looked at the general rules. I haven't looked at the specific alternative scenarios that are what the two map situations are meant to represent, to find that out. But I doubt that it would be there. It would probably, well, I don't know. I really don't know. But anyway, it might be pieced into each one separately, saying the same thing. Who knows? With these rules, I don't know. Anyway, that's going to put me to 8 a.m. on the Prussians, and that's when all of this shows up, because that is when the Auerstaedt battle, the main battle scenario, actually starts. And Davout's in much, much worse shape than he was historically. I think he's just going to fuck up, and honestly, I don't even want to think about it too much. But yeah, I mean, this massive cav has pretty much debilitated his force to a large extent. His force has become much, much less capable. Now, why did I not? Did I take one off there? I think I did. I don't know. Yeah, that would make sense. But yeah, I mean, Cav alone has kind of tied him up, and now there's the possibility of the Prussian army putting forward an actual attack. I have to look to see. Command and control should be coming into play very shortly. But I don't think we're gonna have a leader on the board. Maybe we will. Yeah, we have the king. Yeah, we're gonna get Brunswick on the board. Right then, time for another breakup, obviously. Again, almost nothing changed, almost nothing happened, but I spoke a lot of words, and I feel like I'm hurting myself mentally in ways that, like, I'm not used to. You know, when I was playing the Offensive à Outrance very recently, it's a much more complicated game. Now, I was having to break turns up into little pieces and walk away, you know, partway through the turn and whatever. But with this, I just feel so fatigued off of so little actual action each time. This is a big turn in terms of reinforcements. I'm going to take a look at the smaller set, we get a bunch here and I may have to modify them. I'm going to look at the smaller set of the Prussian reinforcements, which is Hohenlohe, who shows up over here at Kaplendorf. This was kind of difficult to find. There's a fair number of towns on the thing in Krippendorf, you know, but this is so close, he'd have heard things. So this particular situation is difficult. Remember, we had rules restrictions that said some stuff. We'll talk about those in a moment. Hohenlohe slept at Kaplendorf and wrote messages in the morning, not aware before 8 a.m. that the battle had started. Okay, well now it's 8 a.m., he's just awakened. That should not have much effect on anything, except that he can write orders. You'd think. But that's not how it's worded. No unit from the 1st and 2nd Division can move before that time unless French units come close. Now, 1st and 2nd Division is, this is 3rd Division. This is detachment. 1st and 2nd Division is up here. 2nd and 1st, yeah. Okay. So, it will be pretty fucking hard for the French to get there in time. Okay. Because there's no forced march in this game or anything. Fatigue is assuming... fatigue happens and you're assumed to be going... You know, if you're going full speed, you're forced marching, I guess. Okay. Let's keep looking. So now we can... leave that alone. The 2nd Division is free to move at 8 and the 1st at 8:30. Well, yeah, but they can't. They're out of command. So I'm going to have to send orders. And Hohenlohe is not fast at sending orders. Okay, let's keep going. Before 9, Holzendorf's detachment. Well, I don't know what that is. Real fucking useful. Holzendorf, okay, is set up in Rötingen. That's this force here. Okay. I was going to try to look on there, but cannot move before a French unit comes within 2 fires or at any melee of any of its units. Thereafter, they're free to move. These units are released from this restriction at the beginning of turn 7, whatever happens. Well, turn 7's the 9 o'clock turn. They can thereafter move freely, but with command and control, they can't, right? They're still stuck in that defend order until orders get there. And orders are going to take a while to get all the way from Hohenlohe to there. We might be talking about 3 turns, which is not going to be... That's assuming I write that order as my first order. I probably have allowed like 1 order with the Prussians. I don't know. We'll see what that says. Maybe 2. Okay. Other special rules apply, for example, fog, but as they are used in more than one, they're here. We continue down here. We're not in tactical march orders, so we can't detach a couple of units. Tactical march, what the hell does that mean? It's a non-attack movement order kind of thing, I guess. Okay. So that's that. Now, where the fuck did I get my orders that everything's out of control? That's not from the historical scenario of the complete battle, but rather from the opening moves in the fog, which says that for the duration of this scenario. Now, this scenario goes until when? 8:30, end of the 8:30 turn. This is the 8 a.m. turn still. So I've got another turn where these guys are unable to move. Now, that is the case with all of these units, which I guess works for the historical scenario because there's no way orders are going to get to those guys before 8 a.m. and no way they're going to get to these guys before 9, and we're just a lot more restricted. However, and you know, So wait a minute. This is different rules. Fuck. Prussian forces are permanently out of command for the scenario and must apply to all restrictions of such units. As no leader is present, each good unit must remain within 2 hexes of another. Yeah, where did I get the they can't move? Was that the historical scenario? Was that the command and control rules? Which, you know, I think it is. Out of command units cannot voluntarily exit their hex, except if they attempt to come back within their commander's radius. There is no command radius. At other levels, they don't talk about out of command, but they rely on that. You're expected to be near a commander, and not like this. These guys, I don't know. Once they're freed from whatever the movement restriction is, well, wait a minute. What was that restriction? Because if Hohenloh's their corps commander, they can start falling back now. Right? But maybe not. Let's try to piece together all these different rules. And we're basically using 2 different scenario rules because the main battle scenario rules don't cover the early part, even though I'm not doing anything funky like I was over at Auerstaedt. Yeah. This is what's involved in trying to figure this shit out. And I did not have this level of difficulty with any other games in the series that I've looked at. Now, I also have not had such a break between playings. Maybe, and you know, I've gotten older and all kind of other things. So who knows? Maybe I'm just more crotchety. But I think this level of confusion would have caused me problems in the others. I feel like a half-assed job was done on this. And that worries me because I also have the Hanau game box, which was fairly recent as well. I don't know which one came out first. But I'm not as worried about the Leipzig. That was significantly older before the Spanish battles. And I did them. I don't think I had this much trouble with them. But, yeah. Okay, so this is trying to figure out that one fucking piece, right? What it can do. And we have to try to look again because already it's drifted out of my brain trying to look in 3 different places. Probably doesn't help that I'm complaining, but that is how this works. Meanwhile, I don't know what the game is about. Oh yeah, it's about not getting broken until a certain time. Okay, we got to look at the other place, which is the special rules for both. Let's make sure there's nothing there. Command and control. Hohenlohe and Brunswick are army commanders. They can issue 1 order each per turn. But see the special rules on Brunswick. I actually don't have a corps. Yeah, the only thing I can do with any of these units is fall back towards Hohenlohe. I can't issue orders to any of these units. They don't have commanders. Hohenlohe's their commander. They're not in range to accept Hohenlohe's orders. There's way too many units for him to manage. You know, I mean, this is a corps and then some, maybe 2. You know, I mean, yeah, look at it. We're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 infantry pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. Yeah, this is a corps and this is a corps, pretty much. I don't have leaders for both. So Hohenlohe is going to have to try to manage all of this on his own. Now, he's allowed to write himself orders, but these units are allowed to deal with them if Hohenlohe can get in range, but since he can't, and you don't have a fixed order system in terms of like, hey, when are you in command? Check that, do this, check that, do this. At least I don't think you do. You certainly don't have it in the sequence of play. We could look here. Yeah, it doesn't say. The command is decided at the beginning of the charge phase. Okay, so it's done at the earliest part of the turn. So yeah, nobody's going to be in command. The only thing I'll be allowed to do is move these guys to fall back, and I guess these guys could fall back. And that's it. Yeah. And those are probably things that I want to do. I have to worry about opportunity fire, withdrawal fire, as it were, coming from the skirmishers. And that, I believe, will be flanking fire unless I'm allowed to back out a hex or something like that. Yeah, the other thing. Okay, so that covers one piece entering the game. We forgot about the other set. Yep. So I had to look at two different scenario setups for this one, even though supposedly the historical scenario covers the period included in the other one. They have different kinds of restrictions and different kinds of problems, and it doesn't make sense that they would, right? So now on the Auerstaedt, here's the one where I've screwed things up, right? I've screwed around with the rules a little bit, and what I've ended up with is Davout doing a lot worse than he did historically. However, I'm sure we can make that up as we try to figure out what the Prussians' situation is. There's no reinforcements that indicates this. But the historical scenario starts with all the cav set up kind of behind this line and this grenadier unit. Well, all the cav has been engaging the French and hasn't been driven back. The cav obviously wasn't screening whatever was growing here. All I can do is magically place them there. And now I am in the realm of the historical scenario. It is 8 a.m. here. Okay. Now, the French would be around Hausen, so they're not, they're not too far behind. It's just the Prussian cav hasn't been abused as much as it should be. Okay, command and control. We have a special fate for Brunswick where he gets mortally wounded. Some restrictions on movement. The first column at the beginning of the game may not move further east than one infantry unit from the second column. What's the first column? Okay, well, this worked last time. Looking here. First column is these guys. Second column is these guys. Okay, so the first column at the beginning of the game may not move further east until one infantry unit from the second column crosses a vertical line passed by Togwitz. Okay, may not move further east. Well, that's pretty shitty. All right, well, I guess we'll deploy them in line then. Can I deploy in a line in rough terrain? I don't remember. Yeah. That's actually just beneficial terrain to me. Could have put my cannons in there. That might have been wise. I don't know. All right, we've still got thick fog, so there's a 2-hex range, and not quite sure what the cav is up to, but I think Blucher is probably freed up. So let's look at opening moves through the fog. This goes until 8:30, so I don't know. He's got maybe 2 more turns of Blucher crap. No, it's only if you're adjacent that you must charge, so I'm not actually being forced to charge any of this shit. Interesting. Alright. Now, what are the victory conditions for the 2 scenarios? And what's the overall victory condition? The overall victory condition is to break the Prussian army over both maps. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Because again, it feels like one map could win and the other not. So for here, we've got a number of different locations that are important. So Hohenhausen is worth 10 points for both sides. Togwitz is worth 10 points for the French. The road to Nammenburg, if I hold that, and hold is not defined up here where it's first discussed, but it is defined later here in the 3rd bullet point, all of which mention holding, in the French sequence. Now, we've got like 3 bullet points of hold undefined as yet for the Prussians as well. Shit. Okay. What else do we have here? So, killing French or throwing them off the map is worth a point per step. Killing Prussians, Prussians leaving the map by the eastern map edge, this side, is worth a point each. So if I can defeat Davout and run that way, hey, I had done good. Or I can get a half point for each leaving the clear hexes north of Spielberg. That's up here. North of Spielberg, between the 2 small forests. If I get at least 50 that way, the points for that part are doubled, so they become worth the same as pushing through. And only one of these 2 can be taken. Now, I also have the choice to try to fall back and join the Jena battle. I don't think that can happen. Well, it can happen, but then I'd be losing Auerstaedt. Is that good or bad? I don't know. You know, it's like, yeah, then we judge the overall mixture, and we'll see, you know. I mean, if I'm getting like shoved back by Davout, sure. Now the French get points, so yeah, the French get points for killing Prussians. They get no points for like pushing through and making their way over onto Jena. Jena should be a blowout in Napoleon's favor. Auerstaedt is a much, much more difficult situation because Davout has a smaller force by far. Okay. And did I figure that all out? Well, I haven't figured out the points for Jena. Jena doesn't have a point-based system. Jena has a break the Prussian army and break it as quickly as you can. And if I do it fast enough, maybe I can make it over to Auerstaedt with some forces. And we'll see how that all works out. Right? Yeah, this video is going to be this turn and this turn alone, the way things are going, eh? Or whatever. Maybe I did another turn or whatever, but yeah, trying to figure out what the scenario is and how it should play out is just so painful in this one. I found what I was looking for under facing changes. Well, there's this iffy rule here. 180-degree countermarch counts 2 movement points in any formation. What's that? I don't know. Is it a 180-degree turn? as opposed to the normal 60-degree turns that you're allowed? Is it something else? I don't know. I've been doing it as the turn because the next thing is a rearward move without a facing change or formation change costs 1 movement point plus the normal terrain cost, which means I can back out of hexes at normal speed. So I don't, while I do take opportunity fire, it doesn't affect me as a flank attack. Pretty cool, I guess. Seems counterintuitive to me. Like, it seems like an about face could be done with 1 movement point, and it seems like moving backwards, oh, it costs 1 movement point plus the normal terrain cost, so it's double the movement. It's essentially an extra movement point to go backwards. Gotcha. The ease of just moving backwards means that's what I did. Couple hexes where I could, well, no. 1 unit got dissolved over here by fire. Ho and low is in place. Units moved more than half their movement allowance. Not writing any orders yet. The reason is I got kind of defend orders by default, the way I see it. And I just don't see anything that I necessarily want to do in the next turn. I will be in command control, so what I might want to do is defend Auerstaedt a little bit better than I am. But I feel like that's within my purview of defend orders. And now that I'm in command control, I can actually move these units other than falling back towards Ho and low. These units are still frozen. I'll have to look them up again next turn. And, well, the French are probably going to advance and, you know, keep putting pressure on this poor force that's trying to fall back. But, you know, it's not like I have enough troops to perform any kind of rearguard action and get the other guys moving more quickly. So that's where we'll leave this. There's no rally capability anywhere. These guys, units have moved. I gotta give Brunswick a fatigue marker for that. And that'll be about it. And with these huge formations, it means that I don't have the capacity to rest part of my army and move other parts forward. It's one of the big advantages of having corps, is that one of my units, you know, one of my corps can go do something while others, you know, either rest or do something else. But here I've got these humongous blocks that I have to build together. Now, there's this weird within 2 hexes thing, which is not mentioned in the base rules that I saw, but is mentioned in the, is referenced as though it's a real thing that exists in the base rules, in the scenario rules. It would make a hell of a lot of sense if, maybe that's there, maybe it's there. If command control was not just 6 hexes, but 6 hexes plus any units within 2 of one another are still in command. I didn't see anything like that, but now that I know what it should look like, maybe I'll look for it again. You know, it would have been up here in any reasonable sense, but nope. Wait, an overall commander does not bother about this and can always move and lead. In addition, an army leader can... What? Whatever the status of their leader, the units can move provided they stay within 6 hexes, or 10 for the subordinate leaders. That's sub-commanders. Now that gets withdrawn when you're playing with orders. And here's the, during the first turn, all units and all leaders are under command. Yeah, that makes no sense. Maybe over on roll 3 there's something? Oh. Okay, when the corps commander receives an order, the units are considered more apt to fight than other units having no combat fatigue. I think that would be on the fatigue rolls. They have a +1 bonus to the die. In each melee combat, they execute for 3 turns. So you can, like, the reserve rolls are weird. They give you, like, some kind of special bonus that sounds like it should be a fatigue-based bonus, but it's from being in this special state of reserve, which is only at the start of the game. I'm going to ignore the possibility of that order. When we get to written orders, yeah, I'm really not seeing anything about the command control radius changing for subordinate officers. So it's going to be really, really hard for Hohenlohe or Brunswick to command their whole army in any sense of the word. That's okay. As long as the army is largely defending, he can move to the portion of the line he needs to move and do something. I don't know. This is an unwieldy and almost a 7 years war style of situation where once you're deployed, it's going to be hard to do anything. But you don't have that capacity of, and this is where the 2 hex thing would work very well, of, if I can get my entire line to move at once, that wouldn't be that big a deal. But it is a really big deal without that. That doesn't seem to be in the rules anywhere. Even though the hint of it is kind of making me think, gee, maybe I want that because it will allow lines to advance, which even in the 7 Years' War, they were capable of doing. You could move your whole army forward and keep it close in reserves moving forward without all kind of subordinate officers having separate orders. It's still not very flexible, but it actually suits what the Prussian army was like very nicely. And I'm kind of tempted to allow for that. Let me consider that a little bit. But I think we're in the 8:30 turn at this point, which is the lifting of the thick fog. And that's going to have consequences as well. All right. Well, we haven't made it very far. Usually this system plays really, really light, and I'm not spending this much time trying to figure out what the fuck is going on and what is meant to happen. Some of that unfamiliarity, some of it, I think, is that this is just put together less coherently than others. I remember there being issues with Retour in terms of, like, well, how do I coordinate units between the different maps and whatnot? But I think that was kind of the limit of the problem on that thing, which had 4 separated maps, with interchanges, etc. I don't remember the rest of the game being as troubled as this feels like it is. All right, I'm going to send this up just for shits and giggles or whatever.